My name is Chloe. I'm 35. I stepped into my parents' house to get my sons, and I heard my mother say, "Megan's kids get to eat first, and mine have to wait for the scraps." My boys, Noah and Leo, were huddled in a corner, their eyes fixed on their empty plates. My sister Megan smirked at my children. "You'd better get used to it," she told them. "You were born to live off what's left over." My father just nodded in agreement. They need to learn their place. I didn't say a word. I just gathered my sons and walked out. But in the weeks that followed, what I uncovered and the actions I took would make them all scream in utter desperation. Where are you tuning in from? Let me know your city in the comments, and please hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt the sting of betrayal from your own flesh and blood. You will definitely want to see how this all played out. Let me take you back so you can understand how I reached that breaking point. For the 8 years I'd been married, I had slowly, almost imperceptibly, become the financial pillar of my entire family. I didn't grasp how deeply entrenched it had become until it was far too late. It all began innocently enough when I got my first real job at 17. My mom asked if I could chip in for household expenses, which felt fair. It was $20 here, maybe $50 there. But as my earnings increased through college and into my professional career, their requests grew right along with them. What I couldn't comprehend at the time was that I was being systematically groomed to be their financial fallback plan. When I married my husband, Liam, and we both secured good-paying jobs, the requests became more strategic, more calculated. They were always wrapped in just the right amount of guilt, seasoned with just enough apparent need to make saying no feel like an act of cruelty. "Chloe, honey, your father needs some major dental work," my mother would say, her voice laced with worry. "The insurance barely covers anything, and you know how he is about spending that kind of money on himself." And just like that, $1,500 would leave my account. "Chloe, Megan's car broke down again, and she needs it for her job," my dad would plead. "She's having such a hard time as a single mom." That was another $2,500 for repairs. "Chloe, we have to get the roof fixed before the winter rains start," they'd explain in unison, brandishing contractor estimates and wearing perfectly practiced expressions of concern. "We hate to even ask, but we're out of options." $7,000. I paid for it all, every single time, because I loved them, and helping your family is just what you do, right? What I failed to monitor was the creeping escalation of the amounts, how my own success in my career made me a more and more appealing solution for ever larger emergencies. The pattern was insidious. When Liam and I needed a hand moving into our first house, they all had prior commitments. When I had to have surgery and desperately needed someone to watch our boys, Megan suddenly couldn't get a day off work. When we asked them to babysit for our anniversary, a web of scheduling conflicts miraculously appeared. But the second they needed money, I was the first and only call they made, and I always answered. Liam tried, gently, to point out the glaring imbalance. "Babe," he'd say, "when was the last time they offered to help us with anything without being asked?" But I would rush to their defense. "Family dynamics are just complicated," I'd argue. "They show their love in different ways. They're just not very demonstrative people." What I was blind to was the larger, uglier picture that Liam was slowly piecing together. The subtle, offhand remarks about raising mixed-race children. The way conversations would halt and grow stiff the moment he walked into a room. The pointed questions about whether our boys would fit in socially as they got older. I missed all of it because I was so fixated on playing the part of the good daughter, the reliable sister, the family success story who could afford to lift everyone else up. The day everything came crashing down started out completely normal. I had a client meeting that ran late, so I called my mom to ask if she could watch Noah and Leo for a couple of extra hours. She agreed, which, in hindsight, should have been my first clue that something was off. My mom rarely volunteered for extra time with my children, though she'd never say that out loud. When I pulled into their driveway around 6:30 p.m., I could hear kids' voices inside, but something felt wrong. The sounds were segregated. Some happy chatter was coming from the dining room, while other quieter sounds seemed to originate from the kitchen. I used my key and opened the door to find Megan's twins, Emily and Jacob, sitting properly at the dining room table, plates piled high with food, and tall glasses of milk beside them. My sons, Noah and Leo, were sitting cross-legged on the kitchen floor near the doorway, sharing a sad-looking peanut butter sandwich and watching their cousins devour what smelled like a rich homemade lasagna. "Oh, good. You're here," my mom said, barely looking up from where she was clearing Emily's now empty plate. We were just finishing up dinner. I took in the entire scene, slowly. Megan was lounging at the table, casually scrolling through her phone while her kids were already getting second helpings. My dad was in his recliner with a full plate on his lap, watching television. The division couldn't have been clearer. Some of the children were dining. My children were just being fed. Noah. "Leo, how was your day?" I asked, kneeling down to their level on the floor. "Fine," Noah said quietly. At 9 years old, he was already an expert at minimizing his own feelings to avoid causing trouble. "Did you have fun playing with your cousins?" Leo, who was 7 and hadn't yet learned the art of social diplomacy, just shook his head. They were busy doing other stuff. I scanned the room again, noticing details that had somehow escaped my attention on countless previous visits. The way my children instinctively kept themselves on the periphery of the main family action. The way Megan's kids acted as if they owned the place, while mine behaved like timid guests. "What did everyone have for dinner?" I asked, my stomach twisting because I already knew the answer. "Grandma made lasagna," Emily announced proudly. "It was super good," Jacob added, his mouth full. "And what did you two have?" I asked my boys. "Sandwiches," Leo said matter-of-factly. "Grandma said there wasn't enough lasagna for everybody." I looked over at the kitchen counter, where a large baking dish still sat, holding what was clearly a substantial amount of leftovers. There was more than enough lasagna to feed several more people. "Actually," I said, getting to my feet, "why don't we get you guys a real dinner before we head out?" "Oh, Chloe, they're fine," my mom said quickly. "Kids don't need a huge meal." They said they weren't that hungry anyway, but I knew my children. Leo was always hungry, and Noah would never turn down his grandmother's cooking unless something was deeply wrong. They both had a look of exhaustion that went far beyond being physically tired. They looked emotionally spent. "I think I'll make them a plate anyway," I said, moving toward the stove. "There's really no need to dirty more dishes," Megan chimed in, not even bothering to look up from her phone. They ate. "Kids don't need a full 3-course meal every time they're here. Kids, not your boys, or Noah and Leo. Just kids, a generic term for beings who apparently deserved less consideration than her own children." I heated up 2 generous portions of lasagna and watched my sons' faces light up in a way that confirmed they had been genuinely hungry. Not just snack hungry, but needing a proper meal. While they ate, I tried to piece together what had really happened. "So, what did you all do today?" I asked casually. "We watched TV mostly," Noah said between bites. "Any games? Did you play outside?" The cousins exchanged a quick, telling glance before Emily answered. "We played video games upstairs. That sounds like fun." "Did Noah and Leo play too?" Silence. The heavy, loaded kind of silence that says everything. "The upstairs games are for older kids," Jacob finally mumbled. even though he was only a year older than Noah. I see. And what about playing outside? It was such a beautiful day. We played in the backyard for a bit, Megan said, still glued to her phone. But you know how it is with mixed groups. Different interests, you know? Different social dynamics. Different social dynamics. The phrase hung in the air, thick with implications I was only just beginning to unpack. Dynamics? I asked. Oh, you know, my mom interjected, a little too quickly. Different ages, different personalities. Some kids are more outgoing, others are quieter. But Leo was one of the most sociable children I had ever met, and Noah was only quiet when he felt unwelcome. Well, I said, forcing a smile, I'm sure they'll have more fun next time, once everyone gets more used to each other. Another awkward silence fell over the room. Actually, Megan said, finally setting her phone down, we might be pretty busy over the next few weekends. Summer activities, you know. Summer activities that apparently my children were not a part of. Like what? Pool parties, neighborhood barbecues, a lot of social events. That sounds great. The boys love swimming and barbecues. My dad cleared his throat from his recliner. Well, Chloe, some of these events are specific to certain social circles, long-standing neighborhood traditions. Traditions that my sons weren't welcome at, it seemed. I see. I was beginning to see with horrifying clarity, and these traditions don't typically include families that might not fit the traditional demographic, my mother finished delicately. And there it was, packaged in polite, evasive language, but its meaning was unmistakable. My children were being excluded from neighborhood events because they were visibly biracial, and my own family was choosing to go along with that exclusion rather than stand up for their own grandchildren. How long has this been going on? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. What do you mean? Megan asked, but the guilt in her eyes told me she knew exactly what I meant. How long have you been making decisions about what my children can and can't do based on the color of their skin? Chloe, you're misunderstanding, my dad said. We're just trying to navigate these situations realistically, as if accepting discrimination against a 9- and 7-year-old was the only reasonable path. Have you ever had family members treat your children differently because of their race? How did you react when you discovered the people you trusted most were part of the problem? Let me know in the comments, because what I found out next was even more devastating. I was still reeling from this revelation when Leo tugged on my sleeve. Mommy, can we go home now? The quiet resignation in his voice shattered my heart. My 7-year-old shouldn't sound like he's already expecting to be let down. Neither of my children should have to act like they're an inconvenience at their own grandparents' house. Yes, sweetheart, we're leaving in just a minute, I said, helping him finish his lasagna. Chloe, don't make this a bigger deal than it is, my mom started. We're just trying to help the boys understand how social situations work. By excluding them? By preparing them for reality, my dad corrected. The world isn't always going to be inclusive. It's better they learn that now in a safe environment. A safe environment. They honestly believed that teaching my children to expect less, to accept being pushed aside, was somehow keeping them safe. And you think their grandparents' house is the place where they should learn they're not welcome? That's not what we're saying, Megan protested weakly. Then what are you saying? Because it sounds an awful lot like you're telling me my children should get used to being left out of family fun because some of your neighbors might be uncomfortable with their existence. We're not excluding them from family activities, my mom insisted. This is about outside events. Events that you go to with Megan's kids, but not mine. That's different. Emily and Jacob fit in naturally with the social groups we're a part of. Fit in naturally, while my children, by implication, did not. I looked at Noah and Leo, who were listening to this entire exchange with the rapt attention that children reserve for adult conversations about them. They were learning, right then and there, that their own family considered them a social liability. "Come on, boys, get your backpacks." "Chloe, don't leave angry," my mom pleaded. "We can talk about this." "Talk about what?" "How you think my children deserve different treatment than their cousins? How you think it's okay to teach them they should expect less because of who their father is?" The room fell silent. Even Emily and Jacob, who had been chattering away, stopped talking. "We love those boys," my mom said, her voice thin, but they were less important than their cousins by their own family's admission. "No one said they were less important," my dad protested. "You just spent the last 20 minutes explaining why they can't do the same things as Emily and Jacob. How is that not treating them as less important?" I helped my boys gather their things, my hands shaking with a rage I was barely managing to control. "Where are you going?" Megan demanded. "Home, to people who think my children are worthy of the same love and consideration as everyone else." The drive home was thick with unspoken questions. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror at my sons, both staring out their windows with the somber silence of children trying to process adult behavior they can't fully comprehend. Finally, Leo spoke. "Mom, why can't we go to the pool parties?" I had been dreading this question, hoping they hadn't fully grasped the ugly meaning behind the conversation they'd just witnessed. "Because some people aren't ready to welcome everyone yet, sweetheart? Because we look different from Emily and Jacob?" The directness of his 7-year-old logic hit me like a punch to the gut. He already understood more than I'd given him credit for. "Yes, baby. Some people have very small minds when it comes to differences." Noah, my 9-year-old philosopher, spoke up. "Is it because Dad is black and you're white?" "That's part of it, yes." "Does Dad know that Grandma and Grandpa think we're different?" I pulled into our driveway and cut the engine, struggling with how much truth to share with them. But they'd already heard enough to draw their own conclusions. "Dad knows that some people in the world might treat you differently because of how you look. That's why he and I work so hard to make sure you know how special and valuable and wonderful you are." "But Grandma and Grandpa are supposed to think we're special too," Leo said. "Yes, they are. Do they?" I sat there in the car looking at my beautiful children asking questions no child should ever have to ask, and I realized I had no good answer. The evidence strongly suggested that my parents saw my sons not as gifts, but as complications. Liam was in the kitchen when we walked in. He took one look at my face and knew instantly that something was wrong. "Rough afternoon?" he asked. "We need to talk," I said, nodding toward the boys, "after they're in bed." But Noah, with the devastating honesty of childhood, walked right up to his father and said, "Dad, Grandpa says we can't go to neighborhood parties because people aren't comfortable with mixed kids." Liam's coffee mug froze halfway to his lips. His expression shifted through a rapid cycle of hurt, anger, and something that looked like weary confirmation. Did he say that exactly? He said they needed to prepare us for reality because the world isn't inclusive, I clarified. Liam set his mug down on the counter with deliberate care. "And your mom agreed with this?" She said it was about helping them understand social dynamics. By excluding them from social situations. Exactly. Liam knelt to get on eye level with our boys. "How do you two feel about what they said?" "Confused," Noah said. "We didn't do anything wrong." "Mad," Leo added. "It's not fair." "You are both absolutely right," Liam said firmly. You did nothing wrong, and it is not fair. And you know what? When people treat you unfairly because of how you look, that tells you something very important about them, not about you." "What does it tell us?" Noah asked. "It tells you they're not as smart or as loving as they should be. And it tells you that you deserve to be around people who are." After the boys were asleep, Liam and I finally had the conversation I had been avoiding for years. "How long have you known?" I asked as we sat on the couch. Liam was quiet for a long moment. "I've suspected for a long time that your family wasn't entirely comfortable with our marriage. I just hoped I was wrong, or that it would get better after the boys were born." "Why didn't you say anything more forcefully?" "Because I know how much you love them, Chloe." And I kept thinking maybe if I just proved myself enough, worked hard enough, was successful enough, they'd eventually come around. I thought of all the times Liam had quietly endured awkward family dinners, the stilted conversations, the subtle ways my family never truly included him. "Susan," he said gently, "this isn't new. It's just more obvious now that the boys are old enough for it to affect them directly." "What do you mean?" "I mean, your mother once asked me in private if I was sure I could provide properly for you. Your father suggested we wait several more years before having kids to make sure we were compatible long-term. Megan once asked if I worried about raising mixed-race children in such a challenging social environment. Each new revelation felt like a fresh betrayal." "When did she ask you that?" "At Leo's 5th birthday party. She framed it like she was just being thoughtful, asking about potential challenges." I stared at him, a dawning horror washing over me as I realized how much he had shielded me from, how much casual racism he had absorbed without complaint because he didn't want to force me to choose. I should have seen it. You saw what you needed to see to keep your relationship with them intact. There's nothing wrong with wanting that. But now that the boys are old enough to understand what's happening, we have to make different choices." "What kind of choices?" Liam took my hand. "We have to decide if we're going to keep exposing our children to people who believe they are less worthy of love and inclusion because of their race." The answer should have been simple, but it meant admitting that the family I had supported emotionally and financially for my entire adult life had been systematically devaluing my own children. "There's something else," I said, a cold resolve forming in my gut. "Something I need to figure out." "What's that?" I pulled out my laptop and opened our banking app, looking at a part of our finances I'd always preferred to ignore. "I need to understand exactly how much I've been giving them." As the transaction history loaded, Liam looked over my shoulder. We both fell silent as the pattern became sickeningly clear. "Chloe," he said finally, his voice strained, "this is a substantial amount of money. The last 3 years alone showed over $50,000 in direct transfers to various family members, mortgage assistance, car payments, emergency medical bills, home repairs, loans that were never meant to be repaid." "It's gotten bigger as my salary went up," I said, scrolling back through older records. 5 years ago it was smaller amounts, but more frequent. Going back further revealed the whole progression. What began as occasional help had morphed into systematic, parasitic support. Over 8 years, the grand total was staggering. "They've been partially living off our income," Liam said quietly, "while treating our children like second-class citizens." I closed the laptop and looked at my husband. "What do you think we should do?" Liam was quiet for a long moment. "I think we need to protect our family," he said. "Our real family." "What does that look like?" "It looks like setting boundaries. It looks like prioritizing the people who actually love and respect all 4 of us. and it looks like teaching our boys that they never have to accept less than they deserve from anyone, including their own relatives. I nodded, feeling a fundamental shift inside me. The desperate need to keep the peace was being replaced by a much fiercer, primal need to protect my children. I think, I said slowly, it's time my family learned what happens when you take the people funding your lifestyle for granted. Liam smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was a serious, determined one. What are you thinking? I'm thinking they're about to find out what their lives look like without my financial support. What I did next changed everything. The next morning, I took a personal day from work. While Liam took the boys to school, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and began methodically reviewing 8 years of financial decisions I'd never before analyzed as a whole. The numbers were even worse than I'd calculated the night before. It wasn't just the direct transfers. It was the loans that were never paid back, the temporary help that became permanent, the uncanny frequency of emergencies that always seemed to coincide with my salary increases or annual bonuses. My phone rang around 10 a.m. It was my mom. "Chloe, honey, I've been thinking about yesterday. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot. Did we? I just want you to know that we love you and the boys more than anything. If we said something that seemed hurtful, that was never our intention." The classic non-apology hung in the air. Not we were wrong, but if you were hurt. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart. Do you see Noah and Leo as your grandchildren in the exact same way you see Emily and Jacob?" A pause. A pause that was far too long. "What kind of a question is that?" "Of course I do. Then why don't you treat them the same?" "Chloe, we do treat them the same. If you think otherwise, you're just misreading the situation." Right then, I made a decision. Instead of arguing, I decided to hear their real thoughts when they didn't think I was listening. "You know what, Mom? You're probably right. I was just tired yesterday and reading too much into things." "Oh, good," she said, relief flooding her voice. "I knew you'd come around. You're always so reasonable." Reasonable. Their code word for manageable. "Actually, I was thinking of stopping by later to apologize for overreacting." "That would be wonderful, dear. Megan will be here too. We can all clear the air. Perfect." I drove to their house around noon, parking my car down the street instead of in their driveway. I used my key to let myself in through the back door, moving quietly through the mudroom toward the sound of their voices in the kitchen. What I heard next turned my blood to ice. "I can't believe she made such a drama out of nothing," Megan was saying, "acting like we're some kind of monsters just because we're being realistic about social dynamics." "The boys need to understand how the world works," my dad replied. "Better they learn it now than get their hopes up and be disappointed later." "Exactly," my mom agreed. "Chloe has always been so idealistic. She thinks love conquers all, but that's just not realistic when you have mixed children." "The thing is," Megan continued, her voice dropping conspiratorially, "my kids' friends from school were going to be at that pool party. I can't have them asking uncomfortable questions about why Noah and Leo look so different from the rest of the family. It just puts us all in an awkward position." "The neighbors already notice," my mom said with a sigh. "What do they say?" Megan asked. "Oh, the usual things. Whether Chloe knew what she was getting into, whether the boys will have behavioral issues as they get older. People just worry about mixed kids having identity problems." My hands were shaking with pure fury, but I forced myself to stay put and listen. "Well," my dad said with a chuckle, "at least we don't have to worry about Chloe staying mad for long. She always comes around when we need her, especially when it comes to money. She's just too soft-hearted." "She sure is," my mom agreed. "Remember when she was upset about that car loan for Megan? She got over it in a week and ended up covering the insurance payments too. Chloe is our safety net." Megan laughed. She might pout for a few days, but she'll be back with her checkbook open. Then came the words that would be seared into my memory forever. "The thing is," my mom said, as casually as if she were discussing the weather, "the siblings' children eat first, and mine wait for scraps. That's just how it has to be with mixed families. The normal-looking children get priority." "Right," Megan agreed. "And honestly, the sooner Noah and Leo get used to it, the better. They were born to get leftovers. Socially, within the family, everywhere. It's just their reality. They need to learn their place," my dad added, matter-of-factly. "We're actually doing them a favor by teaching them early." I stood in that back hallway, listening to my own family talk about my children as if they were defective products that needed to be managed and hidden away. Not grandchildren to be cherished and protected, but embarrassments to be minimized. In that moment, the last shred of the person I used to be died, and something much harder and colder was born in its place. I walked into the kitchen. The conversation stopped dead. 3 pairs of guilty eyes snapped toward me. "Chloe," my mom said brightly, her tone shifting instantly. "You're early. I was just telling Megan how much we enjoyed having the boys yesterday." The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. "Were you?" I said flatly. "Yes. They're such good boys, so well behaved." I looked from one face to the next, memorizing their fake smiles, their casual cruelty. "I came to get Leo's water bottle," I lied smoothly. "He left it here yesterday." "Oh, of course." "Let me help you find it," my mom offered, bustling around with a phony display of helpfulness. I picked up the water bottle from the counter and turned back to face them. "Actually," I said calmly, "I heard your conversation just now." The color drained from all 3 of their faces. "What conversation?" my mom asked weakly. "The one where you explained that mixed children should expect scraps while normal-looking children get priority." Dead silence. "The one where you all agreed that my children were born to get leftovers." Megan opened her mouth, then snapped it shut. "The one where you all decided they need to learn their place." "Chloe," my dad said carefully, "you're taking things out of context." "Am I? What context exactly makes it acceptable to say my 7- and 9-year-old sons deserve less than their cousins because of their race?" "We never said that," my mom protested. "You said it exactly like that. I heard every single word." I looked at each of them in turn, but what really got me was the part about me being your safety net. Your reliable ATM who always comes back with her checkbook. "That's not," Megan began. "Isn't it? How much money have I given this family over the past 8 years?" They exchanged uneasy glances, clearly uncomfortable with the directness of the question. "We're family," my dad said. "Family helps each other." "You're absolutely right. Family does help each other. But here's the thing about family. They also love and protect each other's children. They don't teach those children to expect discrimination from their own relatives." I walked toward the door, then turned back. "I'm going to give you some time to think. Think about what you just said, about whether you can live with treating my children as less worthy than Megan's, about whether your financial comfort is more important than your own grandchildren's emotional well-being." "Chloe, wait," my mom called out. "We'll talk again soon," I said, "when you're ready to be honest about whether you actually want my children in your lives or just my money." Over the next week, I made a series of calls that would fundamentally reorder my family's entire existence. I started with my accountant. "I need to understand the full scope of financial support I've been providing to my extended family," I explained. "We can definitely analyze that. Do you have records? I have 8 years' worth." When she called back 2 days later, even I was stunned. "Chloe, you've provided over $140,000 in documented financial support over the last 8 years. That's not even counting informal cash gifts or things that weren't recorded." The number was nauseating. It was a down payment on a house. It was college funds for both my boys. It was the European vacation Liam and I had been dreaming of for years. What would you recommend to someone in my situation? Financially speaking, immediate cessation of all support. You are subsidizing other adults' lifestyles at the expense of your own family's long-term security. And if I wanted to recover some of it, that would depend on the documentation. Were they gifts or loans? I thought about all the years of conversations, all the promises of "we'll pay you back when we're on our feet." It was a mix. Some were explicitly loans, I said. Then you have legal options. But the bigger question is whether the emotional cost of pursuing it is worth it. She was right. I wasn't interested in chasing down money. I was interested in removing their financial incentive to pretend they wanted us around. My next call was to a family lawyer. "I need to understand my obligations regarding financial support I've been giving to family members. Are these court-ordered obligations?" Number: voluntary support that has become expected and, frankly, demanded. Then you have no legal obligation to continue. Any money you gave was your choice, and stopping is equally your choice. What if they've built their lives around expecting this support? Then that's their problem to solve. You are not required to financially maintain other adults. That evening, Liam and I had another talk. "I'm cutting off all financial support," I told him. "All of it, immediately." Liam nodded slowly. "I think that's the right move. But are you prepared for the fallout?" "What kind of fallout?" "Chloe, you're talking about yanking a huge subsidy from people who have come to see it as their guaranteed income. They're going to get desperate. They will say and do anything to try and get it back." He was right, but I was past caring about their comfort. "Let me ask you something," I said. "If strangers treated our boys the way my family does, what would you want me to do?" "Cut contact immediately." "Then why should they get a pass just because we're related?" "They shouldn't." The next morning, I began the systematic dismantlement of my family's financial safety net. I called the mortgage company where I was listed as a co-borrower on my parents' loan. "I need to understand my options for removing myself from this mortgage." The agent explained they would either need to refinance on their own, which they couldn't do, or they'd have to sell. The process would take 60 to 90 days. Perfect. That gave them time to understand the new reality. Next, I canceled every single automatic transfer from my accounts to theirs. Then I called Megan's auto lender, where I was a co-signer, and put a freeze on the account, ensuring no more credit could be extended. By that afternoon, I had surgically removed myself from their entire financial ecosystem. Then, I waited. The first call came that evening. It was my dad. "Chloe, sweetheart, there seems to be some kind of banking error. Our mortgage assistance didn't come through today." "There's no error, Dad." "What do you mean?" I canceled the transfer." A long silence. "Then, can you explain why you would do that?" "Because I'm no longer willing to subsidize people who think my children deserve scraps." "Dad, I heard what you all said. Mom said mixed children get leftovers while normal-looking children get priority. You agreed they need to learn their place." More silence. "We can discuss this," he said finally. "Work something out." "What's there to discuss?" "Either you believe my children are worthy of the same love and respect as Megan's, or you don't." "Of course we do." "Then prove it. Start treating them that way. Stop making excuses for excluding them. Stop teaching them to expect less from life because of their race." "Chloe, you're being unreasonable. Number, I'm being a mother. The financial support stops until you figure out how to be grandparents to all of your grandchildren. I hung up before he could argue. 20 minutes later, Megan called, furious. Chloe, what the hell is going on? Dad just called me panicking about the mortgage. I canceled my financial support. You can't do that. They depend on that money. Then they shouldn't have spent an hour talking about how my children are social liabilities who need to learn their place. That's not what we said. It's exactly what you said. I heard you. Your voice turned pleading. Look, okay, maybe we could have phrased things better, but you can't just ruin Mom and Dad's financial security over a misunderstanding. I'm not ruining anything. I'm just stopping my subsidy of people who think my husband was a mistake and my children are a problem. We never said that. You said my children were born to get leftovers. You said normal-looking children get priority. Which part of that am I misremembering? Silence. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You all have 90 days to figure out how to live on your own incomes. If, in that time, you can convince me that you genuinely want my children in your lives, not my money but my actual children, then maybe we can talk about rebuilding a relationship. Chloe, please? Can we? Because I've been trying to work things out for 8 years, and my kids are still sitting on the floor while their cousins eat at the table. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in watching people reveal their true colors. My mom called crying, explaining how their entire budget was built around my assistance. When I suggested they might need to downsize to a home they could actually afford, she called me vindictive and cruel. Megan sent a barrage of texts, alternating between rage and desperation. Her car payment was nearly a quarter of her part-time salary. You're going to ruin my credit, she accused me, as if her poor financial planning was my fault. My dad tried a different tactic, showing up at my house unannounced. Chloe, we need to talk about this reasonably. I'm happy to talk reasonably about when you plan to start treating my children with the same respect you show Megan's. We do treat them the same. Dad, you literally said they need to learn their place because they're mixed race. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? He couldn't answer, because there was no way to explain it that didn't sound racist, because it was racist. Look, he said finally, maybe we've been insensitive. But destroying our financial stability isn't the answer. I'm not destroying anything. I'm just ending my participation in funding people who don't respect my family. We do respect your family. Then show me. Invite Noah and Leo to everything you invite Emily and Jacob to. Stop making excuses. Treat them like the grandsons they are, not problems to be managed. And if we do that, the money comes back. The fact that money was his first thought told me everything. Dad, if you genuinely change how you treat my children, then we can talk about rebuilding our relationship. But the days of me paying people to tolerate my family are over. By week 4, true desperation was setting in. My parents' house was on the market. Megan was working extra shifts and looking for a second job. The comfortable lifestyle I had been unknowingly funding was crumbling around them. That's when they tried a new strategy. My mom called with a proposal. Chloe, we've been thinking. What if we set up regular family dinners where everyone is treated equally? What would that look like? Well, every Sunday, all the grandchildren come over. Same activities, same dinner for everyone. It almost sounded promising until she added, and maybe, while we're rebuilding trust, you could at least help with the essentials. Just the mortgage, so we don't lose the house. And there it was, a performance of change in exchange for cash. Mom, here's what I've learned. When people show you who they are, you should believe them. You showed me you think my children deserve less. Everything since then has just been you trying to manage the fallout so you can keep my money. That's not true, isn't it? You're not calling because you miss Noah and Leo. You're calling because you miss my bank account. We miss all of you. Then prove it. Spend time with my children without asking for a dime. Show real interest in their lives without it being part of a negotiation. Act like grandparents who love them, not like people who tolerate them for a profit. 6 months later, I was loading the dishwasher when Liam showed me a text he'd just received. "Your dad wants to meet for coffee," he said. "Just us. Says he wants to apologize properly." This was new. In 8 years, my father had never once initiated a one-on-one meeting with Liam. "What do you think?" I asked. "I think it's worth hearing him out." 2 days later, Liam came home from that coffee meeting with a complicated look on his face. "How did it go?" "He apologized," Liam said. "An actual apology. Not just 'I'm sorry you were offended.' He apologized for treating me like an outsider, for making assumptions about our kids, for participating in conversations about whether they belonged." I studied Liam's face. "Do you believe him?" "I think he's scared, Chloe. They lost the house. They're renting a small apartment. Megan's working 2 jobs and had to sell her car. They are learning, the hard way, what life looks like without your support." "Good," I said, the firmness in my voice surprising even me. "But I also think he's genuinely reflecting on things. He asked about Noah's art. He wanted to know about Leo's soccer team. He seemed different." That evening, my mother called. "Chloe, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know we're in family counseling. Are you? We're learning about unconscious bias and how our behavior affected you and the boys. We're trying to understand how we got here." I waited, curious if this would lead to another request for money. "I don't expect you to forgive us right away," she continued, "but I wanted you to know we are working on becoming the kind of grandparents Noah and Leo deserve. What does that look like? It looks like admitting we were wrong. About the pool parties, about the dinner, about all of it. It looks like learning to confront our own prejudice instead of expecting children to accommodate it." For the first time, she sounded genuine, not strategic. "Mom, I need you to understand something. The money is never coming back. Regardless of any changes you make, I will never again subsidize this family financially. I understand. Do you? Because every other conversation has eventually led back to asking for help. This family has to learn to live within its means. That's our responsibility, not yours." It was the first time I had ever heard her say anything like that. "If you want a relationship with Noah and Leo," I continued, "it has to be because you value them, not because you're hoping to get your allowance back. I do value them. I know it doesn't look like it, but I do. Then show them, not me. Them. Be the grandmother they need, not the one you've been." 3 months later, we had our first family dinner in almost a year. It was at a neutral restaurant where everyone paid for their own meal. I watched them like a hawk. My parents asked Noah about his latest art project and actually listened to the answer. They cheered when Leo described his soccer team's latest victory. They included both my boys equally. It wasn't perfect, but it was different. It was better. After dinner, as we were walking to our cars, my mom pulled me aside. "Chloe, I want you to know that losing your financial support was the best thing that ever could have happened to us." "How do you figure that?" "Because it forced us to look at why we were willing to risk losing you. It made us realize we had been prioritizing comfort over family, money over love." I looked at her, searching for the old manipulation. but all I saw was something that looked like genuine remorse. "The boys still ask why they don't see you more often," I said. "Maybe we could change that," she said, her voice hopeful. "Not big family events, just small visits, getting to know them." "Maybe," I said. As I drove home that night with my family, Leo asked the question I'd been both dreading and hoping for in equal measure. "Mom, are Grandma and Grandpa different now? What do you think, sweetheart?" "I think they're trying to be," he said. Grandpa asked about my science project, and he actually listened to my whole explanation. "And how does that make you feel?" "Good. Like maybe they want to know us, not just see us." In the rearview mirror, I saw Noah nod in agreement. Liam reached over and took my hand. "Any regrets about how you handled all this?" I thought about the house they lost, the financial stress my decisions had caused, the year of painful estrangement. Then I thought about my children, who were now learning that they never had to accept less than they deserved from anyone, including family. "None," I said. "Not a single one." If this story resonated with you, please make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about protecting your family and setting boundaries. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable behavior that hurts the people you care about most. Remember, you teach people how to treat you and your children. Never accept anything less than their full respect and inclusion.